this program to bring you
Nick Whoa, Cage!
All right, everybody. My name is Kevin.
And I'm John.
And I'm Adam.
And I'm Julie.
And we are the Real Movie Guys. Mr. Referee, lock the door, ring the bell. It's time for a real cage match. The Real Cage Match is a special review series where your Real Movie Guys review 12 films from the legendary actor Nicolas Cage and let them go one-on-one in a tournament-style battle to determine which one is truly the cagiest of them all. On today's episode, we're taking a look at Color Out of Space. A secluded farm is struck by a strange meteorite which has apocalyptic consequences for the family living there and possibly the world. Okay, guys, we're at the pinnacle end of our series right here. This is actually the last movie that'll be part of at least the battle that we'll be discussing as far as the Real Cage Match. And what a way to go out. Color Out of Space. I'm going to start off with this to tell you right away. I don't know much about H.P. Lovecraft, so again, sorry in the comments. I know you guys will probably roast us. You know, I get it. You know, I'm not familiar with the author too much. I know a lot of his stories are have inspired other movies like Reanimator, stuff like that. But you know, fortunately, I've never taken the time to actually read H.P. Lovecraft. But this movie kind of makes me want to change that a little bit because I actually had a really good time with Color Out of Space. Kind of like Mandy, and they're very similar that way. I don't know if this will be for everybody, but if you're into something different, at least as far as cosmic horror, some crazy Nicolas Cage moments that trigger some Vampire's Kiss moments from the past, I think you're going to have a really good time. You just can't really go into this with anything too serious. Just got to have an open mind. I think there's something there for the horror sci-fi buffs. I think you're going to have something to enjoy. Adam, I'm going to start with you. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, another movie where I knew nothing about it going into it. But after, watching the entire movie, I think that it was a pretty decent watch again. I was pleasantly surprised with, everything that happened. I know it's quite a different, I guess, performance compared to especially Mandy for Nicolas Cage. But I mean, overall, I enjoyed my time with that movie again.
Yeah, it's very interesting because cosmic horror isn't something we see very often. I don't think, at least, as far as maybe a little more mainstream coming to those audiences that they'll be able to experience. And Color Out of Space does it extremely well, especially from a cinematography level. I think this movie's absolutely gorgeous at times. And I think it's, in comparisons to Mandy, if we're making that comparison, I think they used the color palette a little bit better in this movie. I think obviously there's more of a budget, I think, in Color Out of Space. I think that's clear to some extent, but I think Color Out of Space is just really successful in that element, and good. I'm glad to see you had a good time there with it, Adam. John, how about you? What'd you think of this one?
This movie is a very strange, another movie where you're just like, what the fuck's going on here?
Right, and what did you think of that? Were you intrigued by the mystery? Were you just like didn't care? Like, what were some of your thoughts on it as you were watching it?
Honestly, I was into it. I thought the mystery kind of seemed interesting. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's definitely one of those movies that it's definitely for some people, and definitely others would be like, I'm done with this crap early in.
Right.
But overall, it was a decent. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's something there, especially, again, if you're into like the horror mysteries, especially the sci-fi stuff. I think there's definitely going to be something there for that audience member. Julie, how about you? What did you think of this one? I know you're just ready to be done with Nicolas Cage month at this point, but
I had a lot of fun with this movie. Well, fun and fear and disgust, but this was a wild ride, and I enjoyed the majority of it. I thought this was, again, like you, I have no real background with H.P. Lovecraft. So I liked the cosmic horror, the cosmic mystery that unfolded in this movie. And Nick Cage delivered another solid performance. I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's interesting. This movie does a lot of things where it kind of stuff. It's very similar to Mandy. I know they're completely different genres to some extent. Again, this is more the cosmic horror kind of base, but it does some similar things, which I think we should address. The first thing it does, it is very slow in the beginning as well. This movie does take its time, setting up its plot. Even at some points, they kind of give you too much exposition, which I don't like. There's one scene in particular early on where Nick Cage who plays Nathan, and his wife Teresa literally stand on the porch and kind of give like a whole exposition as to why they're living where they are, and they're having this, why the whole setup is kind of happening at this point, which I kind of don't necessarily think they needed that, but I guess you got to move the plot along, so we can't argue with that. Also, I think some of the comedy bits are a little strange in this movie. Did you guys enjoy the alpacas? Was that something you liked? Was it just I felt like it was just strange, like a weird inclusion that kind of was only there to be weird. Did anybody else get that vibe with that in this movie?
I loved them.
You love them?
I thought, well, yeah, it was definitely like, we're not conventional farmers. We have alpacas. I think that whole family just kind of gave that like alternative vibe. I liked the comedy. Not all of it lands, but my favorite piece of comedy is after the meteorite lands and the news crew comes out, and then they're later watching the coverage and Nicolas Cage's character is showing him on the TV. And it's like, UFO enthusiast. He goes, I'm not a UFO enthusiast. I called them out. And he's like, well, I was drinking bourbon. And it's like amateur bourbon connoisseur or something like that. He goes, we're making it sound like I'm an alcoholic. And like the title, whatever description, it just keeps changing over the course of the interview.
Was it like local farmer alcoholic or bourbon enthusiast? Wasn't that?
It was, yeah, like local farmer or amateur farmer / bourbon enthusiast,
something like that.
And
yeah.
Before that was like UFO sighting or whatever, UFOologist.
Right. No, I think that's interesting. What did you think of that, Adam? Did you like some of the comedy element that was thrown in there? Do you think it detracted from the movie? Because again, I think it is just trying to be like a B-level horror movie. But sometimes I wonder if that's like to its detriment at times, because I think it was actually genuinely terrifying with its body horror and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Julie. There were some things that did not land, but I mean, for the most part, I enjoyed I like the alpacas.
I was just scared. I wonder, because sometimes I could see people being like turned off by that. John, did you enjoy the alpacas as well?
I don't really care about the alpacas, to be honest.
They are the animal of the future.
The animal of the future. I'm just curious. I personally, I thought they were fine, but I did see some people when I was like going through this, some other thoughts and stuff that were actually really turned off by that, and I was kind of surprised. Like that was the thing you picked to be like annoyed with this movie. Some of the other stuff, like the exposition dumping, I could see being a turn off. Again, just the very long plot. There's also another character which is kind of added. Ward Phillips, who's played by Elliot Knight. He's kind of like a local water tester, which seems to be the ongoing theme in this movie, that he's the guy he's like testing the water, and that's kind of like how like this movie's plot is progressing as far as Nathan, Nicolas Cage, he took the land and from his family, and he's continuing to live on the land. The governor, she wants to build upon his land and build a dam there where they are, and he's kind of just there testing the water, and then as things move forward, we see it advance with that. I don't want to go into too much with that because that's going to kind of lead into the end, which we'll talk about. But what did you think of adding that character, Adam? Did you think that was a good idea to kind of have like a pair of eyes from the outside? Because I thought it was good at first, but then he kind of disappeared midway through the movie and then kind of just came back. What did you think of that choice to kind of tell this story?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what I was going to say is I liked him at first, but then I was like, okay, what happened to him? And then he kind of just resurfaces, and I was like, I don't know. It just it threw it off, I think.
Right, and especially by the end, he kind of turns up at the end of this movie. They were trying to give you a very, if I'm going to make a video game comparison here, very Alan Wake style kind of vibe to his character. Like, I lived through all this, and I'm investigating, and this is kind of what happens. I felt like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity for him there. I don't know if maybe the water tester angle is what they should have went through, because again, I think they're trying to make some kind of commentary with this whole movie too. I think there is some kind of like larger thing at play here with the theming, but I feel like that was just a missed opportunity at the character he could have been, because he seems like a pretty good actor. I can't honestly recommend or recognize him from anything else I would have seen him in, but I did like him, and I thought he was really good, and it was an interesting piece for, especially when you're trying to do a mystery on top of everything else with the horror in this movie.
Part of me wonders, I mean, maybe I would have liked to have seen more of him as well, but any other scenes I feel like would have had to have been off the farm to maybe, because I guess spoiler, not spoiler, he does make it through to the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. And if he spent more time on the farm, would he have been more subjected to the effects of the meteorite and all the other shenanigans? Maybe if they had him like off site, like researching the property or trying to determine what actually landed on the property and kind of unfold the mystery a little bit more that way. But I'm just trying to like play devil's advocate and think like, why wasn't he there more? And I think to maybe just protect his character.
Yeah, and I think the main reason he's not is let's be honest here. This is Nicolas Cage's show. You know, every time he's on the screen, he's stealing the show, and that's who this is here for. You have someone of his caliber, you're going to use him. And it's funny because at the beginning of this movie, I'm kind of like, why did you cast Nicolas Cage? You know, there wasn't really anything spectacular about his performance early on in this movie, other than nice dad guy. That was really kind of like his vibe early on through most of this movie. And then once the shit hits the fan and the family starts being affected by the effects of the meteor, I kind of understood why you picked Nicolas Cage. I don't think that, again, this is another movie where I couldn't imagine them picking anybody else for this role. As he slowly loses his mind to the point where, you know, he's talking to an imaginary family and he's murdering people and his wife's transformed into this horrible thing. It's great. And the fact that we were able to even find out that the director, he actually asked Nicolas Cage to use the Vampire's Kiss voice, which is a movie we did cover on the channel previously. Make sure you check it out. It was great to see a callback. Adam, were you surprised by that voice just like popping up out of nowhere? Because for me, it kind of like just, I couldn't stop laughing as soon as I heard him start doing that. And I couldn't believe I was watching that at first.
Yeah, it was pretty wild, you know, especially because we just recently watched it. So it was like, whoa. What movie am I watching?
And he just kind of slips into it like out of nowhere, which you got to give him some credit for that. You know, again, an actor of his caliber just kind of like talking normally, and then go, no, I can't. I thought he did a really good job. And John, what did you think as far as Nick Cage's performance here? Because did you think it was kind of like the same thing, kind of like uneventful in the beginning, and then became this like only a Nick Cage kind of movie it could be towards the end there?
No, yeah, 100% agree with what you said. It felt like anybody could have played his part in the first one, but then only Nicolas Cage could have done that part, the second part, as well as he did.
Right, and I have to wonder, part of the reason maybe, and John, I want to see what you think, you know, as far as him becoming like, you know, older in his age here, and, you know, being a father, you know, he has at least, I think, three children, I want to say, something along those lines. You know, he's kind of picking more roles that are more akin to his life, and I could see him maybe somehow this relating to his life more, kind of like we said with Mandy, where he was going through a divorce. We found out, you know, towards the end of the movie that's something why he was in this movie, and to kind of use that as fuel for his performance. Would you say him being a father, John, would you think he used that as like kind of fuel his performance, at least the more normal side? Because he felt like a genuine nice guy. Like he really did give that fatherly performance, which, you know, we kind of make fun of it being simple and uneventful, but that's still kind of hard for an actor to get that across so convincingly.
Well, I always feel like I feel like an actor can play a character better if they more likely can relate to that character than if they have no clue about a character. It's almost like they put themselves into the work instead of just trying to play a character from something that they have no clue about. So I feel like he plays this character very well.
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, I could definitely see him like drawing upon his life performances here. But again, like I said, this is the Nicolas Cage show. All the other actors are pretty decent in their roles. I'll say I don't say anyone particularly else like stood out as far as the performances. But what does stand out in this movie, and this is where we're really going to talk about some stuff. So spoilers, I guess, coming up ahead. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you probably should just watch this movie and just see it for yourself. This movie brings back what I think a lot of H.P. Lovecraft people know, you know, especially I've seen Reanimator before, so I kind of had an idea when I heard it was somewhat similar to that. Body horror is a huge thing in this movie. Now, before we go too much into it, I just want to kind of like talk to you guys a little bit. How do we feel about body horror? Are you guys into that? Is that not one of your... I think it's an interesting form of horror that we don't get to see too very often. Adam, what are your thoughts on that? Because I know we could talk about slashers and like all those kind of things. Body horror, I feel like isn't the most common type of horror we see in movies, especially a mainstream film.
It's a weird question to ask me.
I know. That's why I'm asking you, because you hate horror.
Are you into body horror?
Yeah, I'm asking you. I'm going for it. Is that what you're into?
If it's in, it won't take away from the movie for me. If it's in there, I'm still going to watch it. It's not like it's going to, you know, completely ruin a film for me. Yeah. So I'm not saying I'm indifferent or I'm not. Yeah. I love, you know, whatever. If it's there, I'll watch it still.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. The only reason I asked the question is because I know a lot of people don't like that as far as the horror medium. It seems to be like on the lower of the totem pole for people to get into. Once they see like, oh no, there's going to be some weird like changing of like figures and melting of bodies and combining things, and a lot of people get turned off by that. Julie, are you necessarily into that? Was it kind of weird for you? Did it come out of nowhere when you started watching this movie? Especially fusing the alpacas.
I wouldn't say it came out of nowhere because I feel like it was telegraphed leading up to it, especially with the alpacas, because you're seeing the other characters' reactions before ultimately. And I don't even know if you see them right away or if someone else comes later.
Yeah, you don't right away. Yeah.
Right. So whatever has happened to them is horrifying and disgusting to look at. So that kind of helps with the blow for when you actually see what's happened. But the alpacas, honestly, is the least of my worries in this movie. What ultimately happens to the mother and the youngest son is just so unsettling, so horrific. And again, something fucked up has happened to them because you're seeing it happen, but you're not seeing that body horror, the actual morphing in that moment. And again, I do appreciate they show the other characters' reactions first.
Yeah, that was an interesting.
They continue to show, and they hold that for as long as possible, and then they show the reveal, and you're like, oh fuck.
Yeah, you could see they were the director was very comfortable like holding on just like the reactions to things and instead of outright giving it to you. The whole scene where the mother and son are ultimately combined into one being, I was not expecting that, and it really grossed me out to some extent. I thought I was just like, what the hell am I watching as soon as that happened? Especially with the way he kind of fused into her back. And he's like kind of stuck to her, and
he's crying. The sound,
the sounds, the noises, everything was just unsettling. And I'm like, I don't even know if I can stomach this movie. I was getting a little, and I'm not really squeamish, so for me to be just like, this is just really uncomfortable to have to listen to and to hear, especially with Atmos audio going. I'm going to tell you, it's a little disturbing to have to hear that in the speakers right behind your head. Not great. All right, not great. But I think it gets even worse because then ultimately they turn into a spider monster. John, what did you think of that? Did you like the spider monster?
No, I thought that was stupid.
You thought that was is that where you drew the line, spider monster for you?
Spider monster putting people together, it was fucking weird.
Yeah, it's
one of those things.
Yeah,
and then like you're saying too, with like the whole horror body morphia and crap.
Yeah,
I don't understand it completely, but it's not like I wouldn't say it was like my first thing to turn to, but if it's in it, it's in it,
Right, and I think I'll let it get away. It can't work in every movie. There's a lot of horror movies that do tend to try and use this trope. I mean, like the only one that I've seen besides like Reanimator that's done it well, The Fly is another one that does it excellently. It's kind of like as he's slowly transforming into the Fly, he's kind of like grotesque, like there's like stuff coming out and stuff like it's horrifying. But in this movie it definitely works. It's definitely something that kind of really works well with the sci-fi genre. So the fact you have like the radiation coming off from the meteorite and causing these weird things to happen, you can make the excuse for it, and it's very strange. But I think that's also part of like the fun part of this movie is kind of just that sci-fi angle that they kind of chose to interfuse with this, because we find out by the end of the movie that the meteor might be some kind of alien. It ultimately is what it is. And it kind of there's a scene at the end where Nicolas Cage's daughter comes up to him, and she's like the final piece of the family. The whole family gets killed, which I think is kind of risky too for this movie. I was very surprised. I didn't expect all that kind of to happen, to see everyone kind of slowly get picked off like one by one as the movie goes forward. But we see her like grab Nick Cage, and she shows him like, I guess, the visions of like the alien's home planet and where it's coming from, and it's trying to like essentially turn the Earth into its own home planet. And I know me talking about this probably sounds insane, but that's kind of what this movie is. By the end of it, it's just a straight insanity ride. The alien just kind of goes back to its home world, evaporates everything, and the movie ends kind of leaving at a hint that now that the dam actually gets built, because Nicolas Cage is no longer there to hold the land, the governor, or I guess the mayor, she builds the dam, and we are left to assume that maybe there is some like residue of the aliens left in the water that's contaminating the whole coast. Just a very strange movie. And again, it can get away with it because I think cosmic horror is its own like genre, and if you're looking for something like that within that genre, this is probably the movie to watch because I think it does it extremely well. Even the practical effects I think are really good as far as some of the makeup design. Again, because for body horror to truly be effective, you do have to make sure you have really great, excellent practical effects, and this movie does. The spider's the only thing that definitely didn't look too great. You know, I guess that would be my argument. When she's on the ground and you see like they have like the fused body and stuff like that, it looks pretty creepy and unsettling, which does work for this movie. But I think overall, I think this is a fun time, this movie. But before we wrap up with our final scores, I think we need to nominate the Real Cagiest Moment Award. Real Cagiest Moment Award is a special where we get to the real cagiest moment of the film. Adam, I think I'm going to let you take this one. What scene in particular would you nominate for the real cagiest moment? Because there's quite a few, especially towards the end with Nick Cage losing his mind. But I know there's one in particular that you really enjoyed.
I mean, the one that stood out to me was when he starts slam dunking the vegetables, or was it fruits, into the trash can.
Are you listening to me?
You know, I did everything I was supposed to do. I followed every fucking rule in the book. In the end, they still fucking taste like shit. You know what? Fuck that. That's coming up. You know what?
Okay, stop it! Stop it!
Slam dunk.
I just really liked that little bit there. It's like, oh yeah, that's just Nicolas Cage. That seems like he put that in himself.
Yeah, because it's out of nowhere almost, right? You just kind of just like him, just like that burst of energy that we've known Nick Cage for, just grabbing something and throwing it into the trash, slam dunk, just like going crazy. I love that. I think you could also nominate like any of the Vampire's Kiss-esque dialogue scenes. I think are all fantastic in this movie. The one in particular with the daughter where he's like telling her to like, oh, you're going down, oh, you know, and he's like yelling at her. I think that was a fun scene too. Anybody else have any like fun movies? Julie, did you have any like fun scenes that you really liked?
At those two, I mean, any Vampire's Kiss impersonation moment was great. Especially after realizing that after the fact, I'm like, is he doing the Vampire's Kiss voice? But yeah, the fruit slam dunk, that's just so ridiculous. I think those are probably the top two moments. I mean, he's got a lot of funny quips throughout the whole movie where he's just letting his Nick Cage shine, whatever, you know, what have you.
What's his Nick Cage?
Yeah, even like when he's milking the alpaca, I think he has a couple funny lines. He's talking about how he adds lentils to their feed to make it taste better. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's just Nick Cage. He really, you know, brought his A game for this movie.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely something there. How about you, John? Was there anything else that you really liked in this movie as far as like the Nick Cage performance we're looking for?
Not really. You guys pretty much hit on all of them.
I know. It's sorry. We stole your thunder. We took them all away from you.
It's all good.
It's all good. The other thing I want to talk about just real quick, like I said, the biggest best thing I can compliment this movie, besides like its excellent use of the cosmic horror and all that, it is shot beautifully. I think this movie really does have a keen eye in the camera for what it's trying to show you. I think the landscaping shots were absolutely beautiful, and to complement that on top of everything, I think the color design was very successful in this movie. I know when I was looking it up, they were talking about the color in this movie. Julie, do you remember what they were saying about the color as far as this movie?
Yeah, so, well, magenta in general requires like two very specific like optic cones in your eyes to actually perceive the colors. And it's that mixture. It's like a red optic cone and a blue optic cone, and using those can help you perceive what that color is. And then it even goes into the fact that red is considered to be like a negative or an evil color, where blue is true good. So if you have the combining of evil and good coming together to form this magenta color. And even just thinking about this movie specifically with the alien, it's like that. I know there's all those different, I can't remember what that's actually called, with like that chaotic neutral, the chaotic evil, the lawful good. Like, I feel like that just becomes like chaotic neutral. You know, it's not there. Yes, it's killing people and other beings, but it's not doing it out of malice. It's just an alien parasitic being, and it's just kind of leveling the playing field. And it's just that true neutral area.
Right. No, I do. I do think that's really interesting for this movie. Again, I think the color just itself is a beautiful choice because it is like by far creepily used when something happens or there's like a change. They also play with the concept of time a lot in this movie, which I do really like as well. And they don't explicitly just say it outright. I mean, there are a couple scenes where they'll say like, "Oh, well, what happened? I feel like I was just here." It's never like just blatantly thrown in your face that like time's hopping around. You kind of have to look for it. There's scenes like where the clock will like move forward a few hours, and they don't tell you. And a lot of movies like to explain everything for you, which is interesting because again, I think the beginning of this movie was very keen on just explaining how we're getting, this whole setup of this movie. But by we get towards the end to the middle to the latter end of this movie, they kind of want you just to find things and have fun with the concepts being thrown at you, which again, I personally really appreciate that in the film. Always show, please don't tell. I don't need you to tell me. I could just read an H.P. Lovecraft and get the same thing out of it at that point. But I think it's about that time though, where we're going to give our final scores. I'm going to give Color Out of Space an 8.5 out of 10.
They must have got him.
They? What the fuck are you talking about?
They, them, it, that thing that has been fucking this place up. I mean, come on, Dad, don't pretend that you haven't noticed.
Nothing has been fucking this place up.
Why are you so in denial?
Okay, I've had it with your drama, Lavinia. So do me a favor and get the fuck out of my sight, okay? No, actually, I'll save you the trouble and get the fuck out of yours.
I had a really good time with this movie. Again, I think it did get me somewhat interested in maybe picking up an H.P. Lovecraft and reading it. I think the cinematography is absolutely beautiful. I think the mystery is really there. I do like the whole cosmic body horror angle that they're taking here. It's not very common. We don't see it very often, especially in kind of a mainstream kind of film. Nick Cage gives an excellent performance. One of his Cagiest showing, again, even in 2019 when this movie released, he still got it and he's still giving it his A game, even in what many may consider like a lower class of acting. Horror isn't the always most respected genre, so it's nice to see Nick Cage kind of treat it as if it's an Oscar-worthy Moonstruck performance here. He's ready to do what he has to do. I think this is, it is slow in the beginning, and I think there is going to be some turns off for some of the like stuff that's not really explained, or some of it is quite nonsensical, and honestly, just cosmic horror and that kind of stuff just isn't for everybody. So if you're not into those things, this might be a pass. But if you can get past that, Color Out of Space is quite a surprise. I had a really good time, and it comes highly recommended from me. John, how about you? What do you think of this one?
Oh, this one I give 6.5.
Come on, let's go back inside.
It's drawing the lightning.
Not my favorite movie, but I'm also not a huge sci-fi fan either. So this movie doesn't strike my chord, but it wasn't a terrible movie.
Right.
I wouldn't shove it down with some of the other Nicolas Cage movies that we've seen. So
Right, just wasn't your thing though, right? You just weren't into like the whole sci-fi angle and stuff.
Wasn't my alpaca, I'll tell you that.
Wasn't your alpaca, your animal of the future there. Oh, this wasn't John's movie.
Alpaca milk.
No. Oh, alpaca. I don't know about that. Anyway, all right. Adam, how about you? What do you think of this one?
All right, I'm giving Color Out of Space an 8 out of 10.
Well, it's like I said. Yeah, we're a family.
No.
Now, if there's one thing that families do, they stay together. Now, feed your mother.
This was a good movie. I did enjoy it. I thought it was visually very, very pleasing to look at, especially with all the colors. And I liked the story. I think it flowed very nicely. Of course, there were the slow parts, especially the setup in the beginning. But, overall, I thought it was a decent movie.
Yeah, and I think it kind of speaks that maybe there'll be, hopefully there can be some other kind of like sci-fi horror movies of this level. Because again, I think there are two genres that they don't get to play very often, but when they do, I think they do bring something special and unique to the table. We've seen that with other films like The Fly, Reanimator, I've talking about. Even Alien to some extent, has that horror kind of marriage between horror and sci-fi. And I think it's always fun when they come together to give us something we haven't seen before. And I'll tell you, Color Out of Space is something I haven't seen before. So very cool. Julie, how about you? What do you think?
I'm going to give Color Out of Space an 8 out of 10.
Mr. Gardner, were you sober at the time that this event happened?
Well, I mean, I like a bit of bourbon. It comes out of Texas.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I really enjoyed this movie. The body horror was very unsettling, very creepy, which maybe is not bringing it to that 8.5. I will say I wasn't as impacted by the slow beginning as the rest of you seem to be. I was kind of in almost immediately. I was very curious to see what was going to happen on this farm, what was going to happen to these people. I mean, not that I knew exactly what this movie was about, but I just knew some crazy shit was going to go down. So I was ready for this movie. I loved the color palette. I loved even the set design. We didn't really talk about it too much, where how like the flora and fauna were impacted with like, you know, the magenta colored flowers and vines creeping up the trees. I really enjoyed this movie, and I would like to see something again, you know, within this realm.
Yeah, it's fun to see that very like unique attention to detail this movie had, which I wish we did talk about. It was something we kind of stepped over, but you could see they kind of slowly kind of built like the presence of the alien over time over in the movie, kind of just affecting, like you said, the floral and everything around them. Again, like just kind of like with the whole like time essence and everything like that. I thought it was very interesting how it just kind of like slowly infused itself into the movie, and kind of by the time you figured out what was going on or knew something was wrong, it was a little bit too late, which again, I think this movie's really fun. And if you can give it a chance, I think Color Out of Space is a good time. But again, thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. Coming up next, we're going to have the finale of the Real Cage Match series. Color Out of Space is going to be duking it out with Mandy to see who continues. And then we're going to wrap up the series. It's been a lot of fun with you guys having watched all these movies. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. Let us know in the comments below what you thought of Color Out of Space. Would you recommend it? Is it something you'd be given the chance? Let us know what you guys think. But again, thank you all so much for joining us. My name's Kevin. That's Adam, Julie, John. We are the Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies.
If you
real
guys
thoughts.
like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys. You should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.